Welcome, it's Lori. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I altered this book to create some niches in which I have displayed some of my miniature instruments that Mom and I have made. You start with a good solid book. The important thing is that the book be in decent shape and not falling apart. It needs to be thick enough to accommodate the thickest piece that you intend to embed. And before I even start gluing the pages together, here I'm preparing the edges of the book, painting them gold. It's just easier to do that at this step rather than once all the pages have been glued together. I'm protecting the pages with a piece of wax paper. I don't want to get gold paint all over them. Here I'm just selecting which instruments I want to include in the book. I need to determine how thick each instrument is so I know how deep to cut the niche. So I'm taking measurements with a pair of calipers, double checking that my book is thick enough to accommodate the thickest instrument. Oftentimes I leave pages in the beginning of the book to scrapbook on or journal on. In this particular case, I am not doing that. The book is not thick enough to do so, but I am removing some of the pages up front so that when the book is complete, the cover will close nicely and not stick up. So even by removing these front pages, my book block will still have enough pages in it to accommodate the musical instruments. To reinforce the book block, the last page in the book is usually a better quality paper, a little bit heavier than the actual pages, so I'm gluing it down separately. It just makes the finished book a little bit more stable and secure. Now I'm getting ready to glue the remaining pages together. I'm using golden gel medium. You can also use Mod Podge or white PVA glue, but the gel medium is not as watery. You just want to make sure your pages are perpendicular on the right hand side there so you get a nice good bond. A stiff bristled brush is helpful here. I will be applying 3 coats, letting it dry between coats. In between quotes, I weight it down. Again, that's just to get a better bond. Once I've applied the 3 coats, the book block is formed, and you really can't flip through the pages at all anymore. Here I've created a template of the size of the page. I've laid out where I want my instruments to be. Actually included maybe a good 1/8 of an inch, almost of a 1/4 of an inch to spare on each side. That'll become evident as to why further down the video. You're going to want to save this template, so apply it or glue it in such a manner that you're going to be able to remove it and reuse it in the future. Using any kind of craft knife, utility knife, X-Acto knife, and a metal straight edge is helpful, at least in the initial few cuts until you get started. Then the metal edge is no longer needed. I work on all three niches at the same time rather than completing one and going on. It really doesn't matter. But this way I'm able to eliminate or remove that template and get it out of the way. Once you've cut down about a good 1/16 of an inch, you no longer need the straight edge, and you can just run your blade along the pages that you've already cut out. I make several score cuts each time and then remove a block of pages. Eventually the blade holder is going to run into where you're trying to cut, and you're going to put your blade in an angle, which is really not something you want to do. You want to try to keep your edge as perpendicular as possible. That's why this blade that I'm showing here, because it extends out further, you're able to run it along the edge a little bit longer than you were that X-Acto knife. Eventually, you'll see I'm working here from the corners out into the middle. The deeper you go, the harder it is to get into the corners. Once I'm deep enough, it becomes more and more difficult, so I've taken a drill here. It's about a 1/16 of an inch, and I'm actually going to drill straight down into the corners to remove some of the book page. That helps my the point of my cutting knife get into the corner a little bit more efficiently. At this point, I've completed cutting out the niches. I've decorated the cover, inside cover. I've double checked the depth of each of my boxes, make sure that they're sufficiently deep enough. You're going to have several options now at this point as to how you want to move forward. In this particular case, I've chosen just to not cover up the boxes. In other words, so that the items are removable. The shallower items, however, I have glued in. The deeper items you can still remove. They're not going to fall out or go anywhere. They're light enough, and this way you can interact with them. You'll notice that in these books I'm showing, I did leave enough pages that I was able to journal and scrapbook on them. In this case here, these were all souvenirs from the trip. They were heavy metal objects, not too deep. I was afraid they were going to fall out, so I covered it with a piece of plexiglass, very thin, or sheet protector, and then held them in place with some nails or screws or grommets. Something that if I ever wanted to get to those items, I could pry those screws out and retrieve the souvenirs. Whereas in this case here, I actually put a piece of permanent plexiglass on it surrounded by some miniature molding. And that's how I'm going to be finishing this booklet that holds these musical instruments. You want to decide if you want to cover up the book print. This is where the template comes in handy if you choose to put a decorative page on top of it. You can leave the book print there. It's really just a matter of personal choice. I've chosen to cover it up. I just glue that in with some white PVA glue. Also, because I'm going to be laying plexiglass over each of these openings, I'm using some 1/8 inch thick wood to give the boxes, rather to give the plexiglass something to rest upon. Again, you don't have to do this step if you're not planning on covering it with plexiglass. I'm just going through a dry run here. I've cut my miniature molding, picture frame molding, mitered the corners. Once I know everything fits, I'll be moving forward to glue those 1/8 inch pieces inside the boxes in place. Here I'm just using some corks to wait for the glue to dry. Then each of the instruments gets glued in. Using some white PVA glue is sufficient. You want to make sure this is well glued in so that it doesn't come loose if the book is jostled or dropped. Then I carefully glue the picture frame molding in place, trying not to get the glue on top of the plexiglass. The plexiglass is about between 1/64 to 1/32 of an inch in thickness. Here the book is fairly complete. I just have a few more decorative items to do on the outside of the book. But that completes this video. Thank you for watching. Hope it's helpful.